Today what we're going to talk about is quadrilaterals and their characteristics. And what you should see on your paper in front of you is kind of like a family tree almost of quadrilaterals. And that's the way I kind of want to think about it. There's an evolution of quadrilaterals that occurs, and what happens is that they go from the most basic form onto pretty much like the most evolved form of quadrilateral. And that's the way I want you to think about it when you're thinking about the quadrilaterals that we're talking about. So at the top of the page, we want to go ahead and label it quadrilaterals. I know there's not a lot of room, but we want to have a title for our page. Now, this first image that we see, okay, this is going to be image number 1. This is our first image that we see, and we can see that in its most basic form, a quadrilateral, quad meaning 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, has 4 sides. So we can say that a quadrilateral, we'll go ahead and write that, quadrilateral, and it has 4 sides. And that's it. That's basically all we can say about this quadrilateral number 1 that we're looking at. Now quadrilateral number 2, and I'll say that this is 2A, okay, because they're essentially the same thing. They're what we call a trapezoid. Trapezoid is kind of like the strange cousin of the quadrilaterals. It's not like the other 4 that you see down here. It's not like these 4 that you see down here. They're still a quadrilateral because they have 4 sides, but the only difference about a trapezoid is it has one distinct characteristic, and that is that it has only one pair of parallel sides. And that's all we can really say. Now you can see that both of these images, they're both trapezoids. They don't look alike, but they're both trapezoids because this side and this side is parallel, and that's how we mark parallel sides, by the way, on that image. Okay, these sides here aren't parallel, so it wouldn't be anything other than a trapezoid. And then this side and this side is parallel. So that's how we can identify both of these images as being trapezoids. Now 2A, you might also see it drawn like this. You've probably seen a trapezoid drawn like that as well. It's pretty much the same thing. So that's our trapezoid. Now let's get into our main family of quadrilaterals. Quadrilateral and a trapezoid are both very important, and we need to understand what the characteristics of those. But now we're going to move into image number 3. And image number 3 is what we call a parallelogram. Now, the main characteristics of our parallelogram is that it has 2 pair of parallel sides. It has 2 pair of parallel sides, and the opposite sides are congruent. Okay, so when I say that, let's say this side and this side are parallel, this side and this side are parallel. Okay, so it has 2 pair of parallel sides, and then also the opposite sides are congruent. This side here is opposite from this side here, and they are the exact same length. This side here is opposite from this side here, and those are the exact same length as well. Okay, so that is basically what I would say the grandfather of all the images that we have down here. Okay, that's what I would say is the grandfather. Off of everything else, every single one of these images below this parallelogram. Now make sure you understand, all of these images are quadrilaterals, okay? But everything below this parallelogram is also considered a parallelogram. So let me go ahead and move on here to what we call image number 4, and he's a rhombus. Okay. So I'm going to say that my rhombus is a parallelogram. That means that it has two parallel sides and its opposite sides are congruent. Okay, so it is a parallelogram. So it is a parallelogram. A rhombus is a parallelogram. And the main characteristic about a rhombus is that all sides are congruent. So basically, when we say it has two parallel sides, that's our definition of a parallelogram, and that the opposite sides are congruent. So it takes it the next level and says that this side and this side are the same length, as well as this side and this side are the exact same length. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to image number 5. And image number 5 is what we're going to call, and obviously you should know this, a rectangle. So our rectangle is a parallelogram. That means that it has two pair of parallel sides and its opposite sides are congruent. Okay, so I have this side, this side, this side, this side. Okay, unlike the rhombus where all sides are congruent, with the rectangle, the opposite sides are congruent. And it has the parallel sides, but it has an additional characteristic where it has 4 right angles. Okay, so that's our main characteristic of a rectangle. So we have a parallelogram. We have a rhombus, which is a parallelogram, but all sides are congruent. And now we have a rectangle, which again is a parallelogram. It just happens to have 4 right angles. Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about the baby of them all. Okay, basically what happened is that the rectangle and the rhombus had a baby and they ended up calling it a square, and that's going to be image number 6 because it has characteristics of a rhombus and it has characteristics of a rectangle, but it's also under grandpa, the parallelogram. So we have our square. Our square is a parallelogram. And it's going to take the characteristic of a rhombus, which is all sides are congruent. And you should be writing this all, I would hope. And it's going to take the characteristic of the rectangle, which is it has 4 right angles. We're going to talk a little bit more next class about the diagonals and talk about those characteristics, but let's make sure that we understand these. So let me mark this square. We know it's a parallelogram. All sides are congruent. That means every side is the exact same length. All right, 4 right angles. There's angle 1, angle 2, angle 3, and angle 4. Okay, so these are all the characteristics that you need to understand about all of these quadrilaterals. Now, based upon everything that we wrote up here, down here in the table, what I'd like you to do is to put a yes in the box if it's always true. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'll do quadrilateral for you because it requires the least amount of work. Okay, it is a polygon. A polygon means it's a side, it is an image with more than with three or more sides. So a quadrilateral, yes, is a polygon. Does a quadrilateral have four sides? Yes, it most certainly does. Does it have exactly one pair of parallel sides? Not necessarily. My quadrilateral that I have up above doesn't have one pair of parallel sides. So just a regular old messed up quadrilateral doesn't have exactly one pair of parallel sides. It could, but we're going to go ahead and say no. Does it have exactly two pair of parallel sides? No. Quadrilateral does not have to have that. Opposite sides congruent? Not necessarily. All four 90-degree angles, and you know 90-degree means right. That's a no. And all four congruent sides. That would be a no. So what I'd like you to do is to fill out the rest of the chart for the rest of these terms and come back to school with this completed. Thank you.